Those are beautiful words by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and I'm glad to add my comments to his. I observe, and the Jewish community observes the Sabbath on Saturday, but this is your Sabbath, and this is a beautiful way to see how you are making this day holy. It's really beautiful. I'm going to just set my timer here so I can keep track of how long I'm speaking for. It reminds me of a story. There was a non-Jewish friend who went with his Jewish friend to a service, to Shabbat service, and he was asking about the different customs, like when they bend and bow. He said, "What does that mean?" Well, it symbolizes reverence, and then when they go around with the Torah and everybody's reaching out to catch the Torah, he explained, "Well, what does that mean?" "Well, it means that reverence for the Torah." And then when the rabbi got up to give his sermon and took off his watch and set it on the podium, he said, "What does that mean?" He said, "It doesn't mean anything." So when I think about Shabbat, when I was invited to speak, I saw that the theme in your Soul Matters material was delight. So I thought, well, what is the connection there? And I noticed in the packet that they send, there wasn't any mention of Oneg, which is the word in Hebrew for delight. And as it comes from Isaiah, the Sabbath is a delight. But in the Jewish community, if you say Oneg Shabbat, most people know that that's the time for refreshments after the service, when everybody's kind of gathered around the table and the sugar cookies and the rugla. Anybody know what rugla is? Okay. And there's another story I want to share about that. There was a woman who brought her young son to Shabbat service, and he admired the rabbi. They would actually come frequently, and he admired the rabbi so much, he was hoping that he could have a word and ask a question. So at the Oneg, after the service, his mother introduces him to the rabbi and said, "Now, son, would you like to ask your question?" So the rabbi stoops down so he could hear, and the son asked, "Aside from when you're up there giving sermons, what else do you do?" And the rabbi said, "Kid, you don't want to be a rabbi. You want to be a temple president." You always want to know what we're doing. So when I think about, I do want to talk about the Sabbath, and I'll tell you why I wanted to talk about it. We have a study group that's been actually reading the work and studying the life and legacy of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And he was very famous for a short book that he wrote called The Sabbath. It's just gorgeous. It's like poetry, talking about what a beautiful day, the ideal of the Sabbath. So I've really been thinking about that deeply and what that could be. And this is a wonderful example of the spirit of how to observe the Sabbath. The other reason is that we have a group that was experimenting with, there's this new thing called forest bathing. Have you heard of it? It's from Japan. I think the word is shon. I have it here somewhere. Yeah. Shinrin Yoku from Japan. And somebody developed that, and it's called forest bathing. So anyway, we had an experience of that. We were at the Fitzgerald Marine Preserve yesterday, walking around in the forest. It's beautiful. And exploring the idea of forest bathing as a Shabbat activity. Just like being out in nature, right? Just really appreciating what is sacred and just noticing the trees and the flowers and the birds and everything. It was really a very wonderful experience. And then the other reason I want to talk about Shabbat, because I puzzle over Shabbat attendance, attendance at the services that I put on, and you have very good attendance here. I think I heard there's 20 people on Zoom, if not more, and that's terrific. So, how can we make our Shabbat experience in the Jewish community something that people want to come and be together for? So these things are on my mind. I'll mention, if you wanted to learn more about the Sabbath, there's a documentary on PBS, a 2-part documentary that just came out in the beginning of this month called Sabbath, And it gives you the whole history and everything from a historical and sociological perspective. Every angle. It's really wonderful. I highly recommend it. And there's a lot to be said about the Sabbath. I mean, it goes back, it's one of the 10 commandments, the 4th commandment after thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. And there was a poet in the early 20th century who said, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. And as Heschel said, it's a foretaste of the world to come. Here's a secret I want to let you in on. More than a day of the week, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday or even a Wednesday or Thursday, Shabbat is a state of mind. But the key thing is, you can experience a sense of awe and radical amazement any time of day, any day. But doing it together in community, that really is the secret of Shabbat. Coordinating your schedules so that you can all be in that state of mind together. That sense of that cultivating that sense of awe and appreciation for what is sacred and for holiness. The word holy means separate, but it's separate in the sense of that this day is separate from the other days. It's qualitatively different. And so a day of rest, whether you observe it on a Saturday or Sunday, is an opportunity or an invitation to create the space for the sacred to enter. There was, it's a little like a bird feeder. You put a bird feeder out and you think the birds are going to come right away, but it takes a while. You really have to create the time and the space. You put the seed there and they're not going to touch it for a week or two. And then they start to come. And that's how it is with the sacred. You have to create the space for it to feel welcome. And being in a rush is not conducive to that. There was a study, you probably heard of it, called the Good Samaritan Project in the 1970s at the Princeton Theological Seminary. And they did the study where they had 3 groups of students and they gave them, personality tests and all kinds of things and they taught them about the lesson of the Good Samaritan. How somebody who stopped to help is the only person who stopped to help a person in need. And so they were supposed to give a sermon on the Good Samaritan at the hall across the yard at Princeton. And so one group, they told them, you have plenty of time to get there. And so they sent them on their way. And along the way, there was an actor who was pretending to be someone who had some serious health issue and was really needed help. And so the people who had the leisure to stop, they've been thinking about the Good Samaritan, they would stop and help this person. The second group, they told them, don't dilly-dally, but you better get there because it's going to start. They're expecting you any minute. And so they were less likely to help the person. But the third group, they said, you're late, you got to get over there right now. And they were not as inclined to stop and help the person in need. I mean, we probably could have told you that without having, conducting a whole study, but the point is, when we're in a rush, and that's how we typically are, we're multitasking and we're thinking about what we have to do next, we're not as inclined to stop and create that space and that opening for the sacred to enter. They said the amount of hurriness induced in the subject has a major effect on helping behavior, but the task variable did not. To summarize it, ethics becomes a luxury at the speed of our daily life. As the speed of our daily lives increases, ethics becomes a luxury as the speed of our daily lives increases. So, observing the Sabbath is really countercultural in this world today where we really have to be constantly going or checking our phone and so forth. So it's something to think about. And here I am preaching to the choir, because you're all here honoring the Sabbath, but it's something we could think about as we go forth. There's a great title of a book. It's a Buddhist book by a Jewish author, but the title is just as relevant here. Don't just do something, sit there. One other clever idea is I went to a Shabbat service at a synagogue where when you go in, they give you a little pouch about this size, and they say it's a sleeping bag for your cell phone. Try that. And you know, there's a podcast you can listen to on the Ezra Klein show. And he has an episode on the Sabbath where he interviews someone, Shulevitz, I forget her first name, but she wrote a book called The Sabbath World. And she says that there's really 4 key points to creating and observing the Sabbath. To establish guidelines, what you can do or not do. Coordinating your schedules with the others, like with your family or friends or community. Making it a regular habit, and making it joyful, festive, making it a delight. So that reminds me of another story. This is a story called The Curse of Blessings by a friend and colleague named Mitch Sheffitz. He has a small book, and that's the title of it. And this is like the key story of it. There was a police officer who was very proud of his accomplishments and of his uniform and keeping things in order, and he would walk his beat and make sure that everything was as it was supposed to be. And then he passed an alley and saw someone there, a stranger who he didn't recognize, who seemed a little suspicious, a little strange. And the person came toward him and said, "I don't know what I'm going to do with you." And he said, "What? Well, why would somebody do anything to me? I'm the one who would do anything to you." And then they started to fight, and they drew their swords, and they were fighting, and then the stranger kind of put his sword down, but the officer impaled him, and it was very, he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that." And the stranger said, "I'm going to curse you with this blessing, that you should say a blessing every day of your life, or else you'll die." And with that, he fell down and collapsed. And as the officer looked around for help, he looked back and the stranger was gone. So he thought, maybe that was just a figment of my imagination. Maybe I was just dreaming. I don't know. He didn't. So he forgot about it. But at the end of the day, he began to feel his tingling in his fingers and his toes. And he began to feel as though the life was draining from him. And he said, "Oh yeah, maybe I should say a blessing." And he said, "Blessed are you who created that sunset." And he felt the life starting to come back into his fingers and toes. And then he would go about his next day and, forget about everything. But at the end of the day, he would be reminded, "Oh, I better say a blessing. Blessed is the one who created this, these beautiful trees." And the thing was, he had to say a different blessing every day. And so every day he said he had to think of something else to say a blessing for. And this went on day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And before you know it, his personality began to change because of that. And he became a much more kind person. And when he ran out of things to say blessings for, he began to say blessings for his pets and animals, and then his friends and neighbors and family members. And every day he'd bless something or someone new. And after a long time, he began to have a reputation, and everybody wanted to seek out his blessing. And they would ask him to come and bless their synagogue, their new building, or their hospital or institution. And he was invited. He traveled around the world. He lived to a very long life. He actually lived to 120. And finally he said, "I've lived long enough. I might as well just, not say a blessing today and pass quietly and peacefully. And so that was the plan. He invited all his family and friends around. They were all saying goodbye. And then there was one person who came that no one else knew who that was, and came up to the man, and the man recognized him and said, "Aren't you the one I saw 100 years ago? You cursed me with the blessings." And he said, "Yes, I was an angel. And God has sent me to redeem your soul, but there was no soul. And so now look what has become of you. Now there is a soul. And I've come to redeem it, finally." And the man said, "Blessed is the one who created this angel." And he realized that he had said another blessing. He looked at the angel, and the angel looked at him, and neither one of them knew what to do. So let me just close by saying, it's like that with the Sabbath. It's like you say, you bless the Sabbath. You bless something new, something different. And it changes you, it transforms you and your relationships and really the world. And so I'll end with this blessing. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Blessed are you who makes the Sabbath holy. May it be so. I was invited also to add a musical contribution to this. And so I was thinking what song I wanted to do, and I thought there's a beautiful song called Shabbat Shalom. You've probably heard the song Bim Bam, and that's what the kids sing. But this is a little more sophisticated and beautiful song that talks about the Sabbath and its meaning. But I'm going to need your help. I heard there was no professional percussionist here, so I brought my drum out. I'm going to try to keep a beat, but I'm going to need your help to clap. I'll tell you how exactly. And we'll get a little help on the piano too here. So it goes like this. The rhythm's going to go like this. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Time that is tiptoed around, rest from the day that is done and unwound, rest for the mind that has guided your soul. Blessed be he who has made your life whole. Rest from the wind that has blown you astray, tangled your words as if love went away. Rest for the lives that is no longer near. Oh, but tonight they will all come to hear. Shalom. Shalom, 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 Shabbat, shalom, 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 Shabbat, shalom. Lay down and rest for the ones that you love. Lay down and rest